Welcome to the Laughspin.com podcast.
Hey guys, what's up? And welcome to another episode of the Laughspin Podcast. My name is Dylan Gadino, and I'm the editor of Laughspin.com, your home for comedy news, reviews, interviews, and more. Hopefully, it's your home for all those things. Each week on the Laughspin Podcast, if you don't know, myself and co-host Mike deliver what we'd like to describe as a comedy news digest, an extension of Laughspin.com, if you will. And sometimes we record special episodes of the Laughspin Podcast, and that's what we've done with this episode. This features my interview with comedian Jim Gaffigan. I spoke with Jim recently because he's written his very first book. It's called Dad is Fat, and it's out in stores and online May 7th. It's all about his life as a husband and father of 5 kids while living in a 2-bedroom walk-up in New York City. 5 kids. He and his wife Jeannie have a newborn. They have a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 8-year-old. 2 girls, 3 boys. And one of the things I really love about this book is that it's not exactly an advice book. Jim basically lays out what his experiences are, how he deals with certain things, and when he feels it's relevant, he'll offer some helpful suggestions. Another thing I like about the book is that even if you're not a parent, maybe you're just a fan of Jim Gaffigan, you'll still get something out of it because it's just plain funny. And on a personal level, as a father of 2 boys, I have a 4-year-old and a nearly 2-year-old, I found it comforting just to read about another guy's experiences and about some of the difficulties of being a father, especially the guilt. He writes a bit about the guilt in the book, and we talk a bit about that in this interview. In addition to parenting, though, we talk about many other things in this interview. Comedy, of course, religion. We talk a little bit about religion. That gets pretty interesting. Life on the road as a touring comic, and much more. So, let me take this time to thank Jim Gaffigan for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it. I really do. And I want to thank you guys for tuning into the Laughspin Podcast. Let's get to the interview, shall we? What were we talking about? Yes, I'm Italian.
Yes.
And
From Italy. That's why you have the accent.
From Italy. I grew up in an Olive Garden in Italy. That's why I have the accent. Yeah, grew up Catholic, but not, my parents were not very good at making it seem super important.
Right.
Which I'm totally down with.
Yeah.
But you're what? Jeannie's,
she's very Catholic.
She's into it.
And I think I came around. I used to describe myself as, like I used to kind of like, I'm a former Catholic, da, da, da. And now it's almost, I don't know if it's a contrarian spirit in me. And now I'm like, yeah, I'm a Catholic. Yeah.
Contrarian against your former self?
Well, or against the trend of intellectualism being tied to atheism.
Right.
I'm like, you know what? I don't know. And you know what? I could be the beneficiary of a lot of mercy. And so therefore, yeah, I'll go in.
You'll take a stab.
On the team.
Yeah, I mean, maybe at some point I'll come around as well.
You will. I promise. This conversation's all about that.
Are you trying to? This is what scares me about it, Jim. You're trying to. The other day, these people came to our house with a pamphlet. They were not. Yeah. I assume they were. What do you call them? Jehovah's Witnesses or something.
What? Like I would know. Well, you're a religious freak. Are they friends of yours, Jim? Yeah.
But so my wife answered the door and she took the pamphlet and she was like, "Oh, okay, thanks." And I gave them the pamphlet back because I don't want to encourage people. I mean, outside of me not wanting to deal.
You realize giving the pamphlet back, that's not going to get you a show on MSNBC, right?
Yes. Right. I do realize that.
Right.
But when you break it down, it's a little scary because they know where you live now.
Well, I think they knew where you lived beforehand. That's why they gave you the. Why is there some massive? Here's the reality. The reality is that people try and find meaning everywhere.
Absolutely.
Whether it's in a fortune cookie, an astrology symbol, a yoga class, an Us Weekly. And so if some people find it in religion, that doesn't necessarily disqualify them. And I think that there's a modern day view that they're nutbags.
Right.
When the reality is most people are nutbags. And some of the logic is that, like, religious people, there's this history of corruption for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that doesn't necessarily have to do with religion. That has to do with human beings. It's like we're sitting in a country that we stole from the Native Americans. And, you know, I still am a proud American because I love Jesus in America. No, but do you know what I'm saying? It's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I think it's a contrarian thing, because there's part of me that is, it's like, no, I feel as though the entertainment industry in some ways says, here's what you're supposed to believe. And my instinct is like, no. You know, it's, you know, if I listened to kind of social peer pressure, I would still be in a town of 3,000 people in Indiana.
Right.
And that's why I'm running for senator.
I have where religion aggravates me is when I don't care that these people handing out pamphlets are religious.
Yeah.
I care that they're coming to my home
Right.
and trying to make me join their religion.
Well, it's absurd when you think that would work.
Yeah.
Like, we're sitting there going, you know what? I probably would be a Jehovah's Witness if someone would come to my door and interrupt me when I'm in the bathroom taking a shit.
Right. And that's what bothers me, because 9 times out of 10 or 9.9 times out of 10, they're not going to convince someone to come to their church. But that 1% or that less than 1% of people that they do visit are going to join them. And that person is going to be, and this is not, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way, because we are all damaged, and I'm damaged and you're damaged, and
Right.
we're all damaged in different ways. But that person is going to be very damaged, and that's not right. That you are preying on, you know, your shooting percentage is going to be bad, but once you hit a shot, that person is going to come with you, and you're gonna take advantage of that person's weak state.
I understand what you're saying, but this is human behavior, right? Human behavior is constantly what, you know, we both have children.
Yeah.
The children from a very early age are manipulating you, trying to get a movie or dessert. Yeah. So it's like, you can sit there and say, oh, religion does all these horrible things. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. But I also would say, so do the commercials for HBO.
Yeah.
They convince you that watching some show is the highlight of your life. Mm-hmm. And that is actually a false promise. But I fall victim to it. You know, it's like, look, I love a lot of different types of food, but we are the victim of, a brainwashed consumerism that did not exist 100 years ago. It was kind of implanted after World War II. Like, it's not about just having the needs that we require for day to day. It's like we need to have newer things and better things. And that's what's, you know, is that as bad as religion? I know that religion, people are like, I can't believe we're talking about religion. It's like how to alienate half your audience.
No, this is good. This is...
But I'm just saying that, like, human beings, bad. You know, idealistic, well-intended thoughts, good. That's my belief.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And like as I've gotten older, I've become less and less, active in my, anti-religion thought process. Now I'm at the point where it's just not part of my life. It's, you know.
Yeah, no, well, I remember, when growing up in Indiana, I worked in a grocery store, and there were a lot of born-again Christians that worked in the grocery store that every day would try and talk to me about Jesus and being saved mm-hmm. and all this stuff. And it drove me crazy. Like, I really resented it. And so, but just because I dislike their behavior doesn't discount, don't call it a religion, call it a philosophy. It's like the golden rule. Mm-hmm. It's like, what's wrong with the golden rule? Treat others as you want to be treated, right? So it's, I mean, I'm not smart enough to probably have this conversation. I'm sure there's people listening going, Gaffigan's an idiot. But I'm just, and maybe it's because, but I believe in a lot more gray than people think. People think, oh, it's either black or white. It's either, Drudge Report or Huffington Post. It's like, there's a lot more gray.
Sure.
And that's why I'm running for senator.
I'm going to vote for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to move to wherever you live.
Yeah.
Register.
Yeah.
And vote for Jim Gaffigan.
Yeah. Why not?
Whatever makes people happy. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
Of course.
Then,
as long as you're, and as long as it's not associated with intolerance too. I mean,
right.
There's a certain amount of intolerance where I just, come on. It's like, do we really care if about someone's sexual orientation? I mean, I did this pilot for CBS. I'm bragging. No, I did this pilot, and there's a transgendered character in it.
Yeah.
And I suppose on the surface, that could be viewed as a stunt. But some of it is like, what we consider our biases that we're dealing with today, it's like our children will think that we're very biased.
Yeah.
It's just inherent to every generation. And I do think that, obviously gays should be allowed to get married and all that shit. But it's like, transgender people, it's not like they're choosing to switch genders.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So where's our empathy there? And then also it's like when people make jokes about midgets or little people, I'm like, really? And believe me, I'm sure I have stuff in my act where people are like, that is, hateful towards good-looking people or something like that. But I think that there's, we're always learning about this, but we should be a little bit more compassionate in that there's, just because someone is Republican doesn't make them the most evil person on the planet. I guess because
Agreed.
I grew up in a red state.
Yeah.
And I'm Democrat, I'm liberal, but I'm far more understanding of someone who has Republican views. Mm-hmm. It's like, I get it. I don't agree necessarily, but I get it.
Yeah. And I think that's good that you have that experience.
Yeah.
So this pilot for CBS,
yes.
This is a current thing, or?
Yeah, it's a current thing. And it's, it's an absolute long shot.
Sure.
And
this is the one you sold a while ago, or did you send a second? Did you do?
Yeah, my wife and I, we did a one with NBC.
Right.
And then we did a script with NBC. And then Peter Tolan and I and my wife sold one to CBS, and we shot the pilot here around this neighborhood, and then it goes into testing, and it's a long shot. I mean,
yeah,
it's weird.
So this is the one based on your life?
Yeah, like the last show was about me having 4 kids, and then this show was about me having 5 kids.
Right.
And if it doesn't get picked up, then the next show will be about me having 6 kids.
Sure.
So
sure,
but I don't know. It's, I think that it gets to a point where you just want creative fulfillment, as corny as that sounds, and you also want to be able to do things that you're excited to do and not embarrassed of. And so I'm proud of the pilot. I think it's funny. So if it doesn't get picked, I'd rather do something that I like that doesn't get picked up than do something that makes me cringe that gets picked up.
Right. Because you're not in a position, at this stage in the game, you're not in the position where, if this doesn't get picked up, you're going to spiral into a years-long depression and
right. I've dealt with enough rejection.
Right. I've
had enough of those years.
You've spiraled enough.
Yeah. I mean, I say that. Hopefully I don't freak out. But, you kind of, there's a callous that, the calluses that develop in dealing with rejection, because there's...
Well, you would have to, else you'd be a puddle. You'd be a puddle.
And I think,
you couldn't be a comic.
Yeah, I think that actors have to deal with more rejection than comedians. I think comedians at least get to pursue their art, and there's some kind of control, whereas actors just sit around waiting for the opportunity to audition.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, auditioning it's like stripping, except for you don't get $1, And I've stripped, not on stage or anything like that, just outside of a Victoria's Secret, but they didn't let me in.
Really?
No.
You would think they would reward you.
Why not?
Or they'd want to get you out of the public eye and just bring you in.
No, they just ignored me.
That's not right. So who else was in this pilot?
My wife was played by Mira Sorvino.
Really?
Yeah. And my 5 children were played by my 5 children. And then my son's preschool teacher was Janine Garofalo. And we were interviewing at a school where one of the women that worked at the school was Marina Franklin.
Oh, nice.
And we also went to a cupcake shop where Hari, I'm going to butcher his last name.
Kandabolu.
Yeah. He worked at the cupcake shop.
Really? I don't get any... Good job, Dylan. That was amazing.
That was a pretty... well, I should know it. I should know it, but my short-term memory is just non-existent. And then Jessica Curson had a very funny role in it.
That's an amazing cast.
Yeah, it's a good cast.
Let's get this thing made.
Well, we'll see. It's weird because there's also something about podcasts where you listen to it and you're like, all right, is this really his personality, or is he just kind of putting it on like the false modesty? Like, gosh, gee, I don't know, Dylan. I'm just so happy to be, But there is something you really don't know with TV shows.
Yeah, you don't.
And I really am, very lucky, to get a shot at that.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody listening who thinks Jim is being false or not true in his modesty, yeah, it's a long shot. I mean, your pilot has been made, and so has, I don't know, a dozen other comedy pilots
just for CBS,
right? And that's just one network. And I'm not super familiar with the other pilots going down at CBS specifically, but then you get into the point, you get into the realm where you're competing against, quote unquote, celebrity pilots, where not that you aren't,
Robin Williams has a pilot.
That's right. Yeah.
And,
so I mean,
the creator of 2.5 Men, Chuck Lorre, who also did Mike and Molly, who also did Big Bang Theory,
right,
is doing a pilot with Anna Faris.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and Allison Janney. So the competition is pretty severe.
Yeah. By the time you get to pilot season, it's already stacked.
Yeah.
But it's the quote unquote celebrity pilots. They don't. A lot of those don't get made either. So. Right. You never know. You never know. But that would be, and that would probably give you'd be on. I guess you'd be on the road a little bit less if that gets picked up, and you'd be working, of course. I mean, it's give and take. I guess you'd be on the road less, but you'd also be away during the day.
Working a lot more.
Yeah.
I mean, as a father, you're a father, there's a balancing act that you want to accomplish where, the one thing you can't, I think that fatherhood it's a pretty improbable task, but I do think that you don't want to look back and go, geez, what was I doing?
Yeah.
Going out of town to just do that extra gig when my son needed me to hang around him. And so the balancing act is, if this TV show doesn't go, I'm fortunate enough that when I travel and do stand-up, it's just theaters on weekends. So it's like Saturday, sometimes Friday and Saturday.
Right.
Whereas if this TV show goes, I'm probably going to be working like 16 hours a day, which does not contribute to great parenting skills.
No.
And which is not a good thing. So if it doesn't go, I'm like, all right, good. I'm going to be able to take my kids to soccer. Right. And but it's, as it's a balancing act, right? And some of it is like, as a creative person, you need some of this time alone to work on things, and that time alone means that you're not having that time alone with your kids, and so it's a balancing act. But I would love to do the show.
Yeah, there's a lot of you talk about it in your book, and by the way, Jim does have a book out. When's it coming out?
May 7th.
May 7th. Okay. So depending on when you're listening to this, it's either out or it's about to come out May 7th. It's called Dad is Fat. And you talk a little bit about the concept of guilt in the book. And that's something that I really enjoyed reading. I enjoyed reading the whole thing, mainly because I mean, the reason I love stand-up comedy so much is, and this might sound corny or obvious, is that, there's that connection. There's that, hey, here's a guy on stage talking about something that I too experience, and I feel bad about experiencing it, but he's experiencing it, and it's okay because we're both shitty people, or we're both this way. And so this book especially, I mean, it's about you and your wife raising your 5 kids, and there's a lot of parts in it that it was just very comforting for me to read, but the parts on guilt really hit home, because it's everything. I feel guilty for being here, and I feel guilty that, I mean, my wife, and I hate that this is a true, that this stereotype is true, that the woman usually does more work than the husband, and I can't make believe that I'm capable of doing as much as my wife can do. We are, and I don't want it to sound like a rationalization, but I really believe guys are wired differently.
Yeah.
And I can't.
I mean, dogs and cats are different too. I mean, look, I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with you. There is something discomforting about this notion that women are better at parenting or nurturing or comforting, and instinctively they do it. But the reality is that we are animals, and we are 2 different types of animals. And that's not to say that we don't aspire to make it equal. We don't aspire to, obviously equal pay for women and all that stuff. But, I'm very resigned to the fact that women have an enormous advantage. Not all, and I'm not excluding all men.
Right.
I'm talking about me. Mm-hmm. That from what I've observed, most women are much better at parenting than guys. Mm-hmm. And that's some of my point of view. And I feel guilty about that. I mean, I have that chapter about vice president, because being a dad is kind of like being a vice president. Like, you're an authority figure, but you're deferential to your spouse or your partner, and that's not laziness on my part. That's kind of like a practical reality of how to manage things. And I think that there's something about the guilt that it's strange, because as a man, we're kind of, or forget man, as an individual, I'm kind of like this go-getter. I'm kind of like assertive. Yeah. I can be a nudge. But I know instinctively when it comes to parenting situations that I should be deferential to my wife, because she knows more. Right. And her instincts are less, caveman-like than mine, And so, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that, maybe in generations that won't be the case. But I think that maybe it's, sexism that's been kind of enforced over centuries, and so it's going to take us a while for that to even out. But there's a nurturing thing that I think men don't instinctively have it. I mean, we love our kids, but there's I don't know, having 5 kids, I've seen myself evolve completely from the first kid to the 5th kid, and just I talk about it, it's beyond equal in a lot of ways now. It's, we have a 20-month-old baby and we have a 6-month-old baby. And so essentially I joke around and I say the 20-month-old that I'm a single dad because I'm in charge of him.
Right.
Pretty much, all night, definitely, because my wife is breastfeeding our 6-month-old.
Right.
And so I'm definitely up to the skill set, but I've had to learn that, and
Right.
it's been environmental. But I also, individually, I was never a babysitter or a camp counselor.
Right.
I didn't be like, yeah, let me play with my nephews and nieces.
Right.
I mean, I was a mediocre uncle. I loved my nephews and nieces.
Right.
But it was kind of, I'll take them to Dairy Queen.
Sure.
Yeah.
You weren't. Yeah. And I was the same way. I never really liked kids. I never liked being around them.
I don't think I did.
I never changed a diaper before, but it just.
But there's a switch that happens when it's your kid.
Well, yeah, because...
And that's not arrogance. I think that's biological.
Yeah.
That's why supposedly babies look like the dad, because in caveman times, the dad would eat the baby.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they're not that good tasting. I mean, not that I've eaten. I ate one.
Well, but, you can't... I mean, you live in a 2-bedroom apartment. You can't... And enough's enough.
Yeah, I don't want to walk all the way to the refrigerator.
That's...
Jim, you talked about eating a baby on the podcast? I can't believe you would talk about that. I was trying to be funny. It wasn't funny. It was just weird.
It's okay. We can...
But the guilt, how do you deal with the guilt?
I don't... I try to... compensate in other ways that I'm comfortable. I try to do things that I'm slightly out of my comfort zone doing.
Yeah.
And I try to do those things. And this is another thing that's stereotypical of guys, and unfortunately I think is sort of true. My wife will do 10 things during the day. Yeah. Maybe it's, cleaning something, or maybe she cooks something, or taking the kid to the park, or something like that. I will do 3 things. Yeah. And I will need her to know that I did those 3 things. And that's born of insecurity. That's like, please, I want you to think that I'm doing something that's worth something. And the thing is she is so not on my ass. She's not like one of these wives that are like on my ass, like at all. And I still feel guilty. So I can't even imagine. And maybe that's why I feel guilty. Maybe if I had a wife who was a complete nag, I wouldn't feel guilty about not doing things.
I think it's a generational thing too.
Yeah.
I think that we saw, there was a big shift that occurred when we were growing up where, the Phil Donahue kind of era of, Dr. Phil kind of touchy-feely, men embracing emotions, men getting involved in parenting. I'm older than you, but my dad, I was talking to my brother about this, because what I say in the book is, my dad did nothing. He brought home the bacon. And by the way, he didn't cook the bacon. He didn't put the bacon on the table. He didn't clean up afterwards. He didn't even buy the bacon. He just, he somehow provided some of the money. He ate the bacon. Right. But anyway, it's not that my dad didn't do anything. It's that he didn't feel guilty. And that I have actually 2 slings. I have a summer sling and I have a winter sling to carry babies around because we have so many of them. And I feel guilty all the time. But I think that some of it is an awareness of parental responsibility and the fact that it doesn't become, it's not instinctive for some of us.
Right.
This is probably the most boring thing for some
No,
of you.
no.
But
it's part of the evolution. We feel guilt because we're maybe in a few generations we're my sons are going to be, the husbands and fathers that I wanted to be.
Right. Yeah. I think some of I don't watch Mad Men, but I think some of the appeal of Mad Men, among the many appeals, is the shock and horror of how men behaved then. Yeah. And I'm not just talking about the philandering or the consumption of alcohol and smoking. It's just back in the 50s and 60s, the heyday of the white male was just unbelievable. It was like Rome. Like, people watch it like it might as well be that Rome miniseries. They're like, really? Men did that? You know, there was that kind of homophobia that existed then. And so we're kind of aware, and we're almost kind of, I mean, at least for me, some of the guilt is I've felt I've seen myself mess up and fail enough times. And I just, I'm not smart enough to, when I go to a parent-teacher conference, there's a little bit of, it's there's so many different topics. It gets so messy, but it's a strange guilt. And, I've been someone who's been in touch with guilt. I talked about the Catholic guilt, and there's something about parental guilt where it is just, it's powerful. I'm about to go out of town for 5 days, and I'm going to feel like shit most of those days. And it's not like I didn't have a lot of guilt before. I definitely had a lot of guilt, but I don't know. It's weird because there's just never ending. Do you kind of open up about? Do you talk to your wife about you feeling guilty? Yeah, there's pretty. I mean, my wife and I, Jeannie, who I mean, obviously we do everything together. Yeah. We write together, and she coaches me in acting, and obviously we have these kids together. So there's an ongoing conversation, and as a parent, there's these conversations you have to have about your child, where just from a parent-teacher conference. And I'm not talking about, I joke around in the book that like parent-teacher conferences in nursery school, it's like, it's either like serial killer or not serial killer. Right. But there is something about each of these children that, you're planning, you're kind of like the boss in some ways. You're like, how do we make sure that they succeed? And so it's an ongoing conversation where I will say, I feel, it's like I feel so bad that I'm out of town doing this, and I'm gonna miss my daughter's chorus recital, and so I can only imagine. But I mean, my brothers, they're working, they work crazy hours. The irony about being a comedian is that I probably end up spending more time with my kids than if I had a 9-to-5 job. Because, I get done with putting them to bed, and then most often I go out and do shows. Right. That's not to say that I get up bushy-eyed and, I get up bright and early, but there is something about it all works out, and I've taken my kids to soccer every Wednesday and stuff like that. So it works all right. So run me through a typical day of you in town. You get up at what time do you get up? I would say that I get up usually, I mean, there's no consistency, right? Because sometimes I'll have press, sometimes I'll have a flight, sometimes I'll have a parent-teacher conference, sometimes I'll have to go into school with one of the kids for some other reason so I would say, like today I got up at 10. Okay. But talk about feeling guilty. It's like, so at 10, I have 3 kids that went to school. I have a almost 2-year-old that I could have taken to the park because it was a beautiful day today. Yeah. But, and then I have a baby. But to put it in perspective, we have to flash back to last night. So last night, I did shows. I did Whiplash and I did The Stand. And so then I get home at midnight. Jeannie and I talk. Patrick's awake, the baby. He's the youngest. He's the youngest. Okay. Then Michael wakes up. Then Katie wakes up. Second youngest. Michael's the 20-month-old. He's the 20-month-old. Okay. Then my 3-year-old wakes up with a nightmare. Okay. So Jeannie and I both spend the next couple hours kind of getting them back down. And of course, the 6-month-old, he's, it's ongoing. Sure. We're not really putting him down. No. And so so that probably occurred until 3 a.m. Oh, dear God. Okay. So in different forms. And I woke up this morning, Of course, I wake up at 6:45, 7, because my daughter Katie is then back in our bed because she's come in our room.
And Katie's 3?
3.
3, okay.
3. So there's something about, the 10 a.m. wake-up time where I feel kind of guilty about it, but I also know that me on no sleep, no one would want to be around me.
Right.
It's not a good idea. And my wife totally gets that.
Yeah.
And so...
Who takes them... Now, who took them to school? The ones that go to school?
Well, my wife gets up with them.
Okay.
And she was up with me last night, too.
Right.
So she gets up with them. My 2 daughters go to school on the Upper East Side.
Right.
And they go... go in a car that we've set up. Okay. And then my son goes to a school in Chelsea, and he goes with a friend of ours who has a 4th grader in that school in the morning. Okay. And so then pickups are a whole different thing. Well, my daughter Katie ends at 12. Mm-hmm. And then my daughter Mari ends at 3, and then my son ends at 3, and then it's all kind of like. But usually I'm supposed to do everything, and then we have dinner at 5, and then
that's like a set. That's a
set.
5 o'clock.
We try and do it 5.
That's
Sometimes
great.
It's later, and then we slam into homework, reading, baths, and then often I'll have a spot at say 8. Right. So it's 5 to 7:30 is just like chaos. And then I'll go out and do a spot. Sometimes I'll do a spot, come back, and a couple of them are still awake. So then I'll be able to do bedtime with them. Right. And then, but if I have more shows, it's different. Yeah. But sometimes I get up at 7 and at 6:45, and I'll go with my daughters to school, or I'll take my son to school, or I'll take my other son to the park. It's, it's never ideal, but it's because I did this interview for the Sunday New York Times where it's like, what's your Sunday like? And I'm like, it's never the same. Mm-hmm. So am I coming from out of town? Because one of the things I always do, this is all so boring, it's never going to end up in it.
Did you tell the Sunday New York Times that part of your Sunday is to read the Sunday New York Times?
I did not.
That a boy, Jim.
And we have a different section that we love. I love the arts. No, and
I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to count the number of times they refer to you as... Wait, is this a new story?
Yeah, this will be a new story.
Okay. I don't want to talk about it like it... I can't wait to see how many times they call you Mr. Gaffigan.
Mr.
That's my favorite thing about the New York Times.
Yeah, there's a formality,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yes. Well, there's something weird also about you do an interview, and the most well-intended journalists will get details wrong. Yeah. Even though the New York Times is not supposed to.
Yeah.
But
they've made some mistakes in the past.
Yeah. I'd say that, I don't know, that Gulf War, that was a mistake, right?
Yeah. And then what was that guy, Jason Blair? Was that his name?
Oh, yeah. Well, there was a couple of those.
Was there? There was more than one, huh?
Yeah. Well, there was one. There's the plagiarism thing is kind of gone everywhere.
Yeah. I don't really read the liberal media.
You don't, huh?
But, no.
So you're a little Fox Newsy.
No,
you're not Fox Newsy.
I listen. You know what I listen to? I listen to the POTUS channel on Sirius XM.
Oh, you do?
Big fan.
That with isn't there a comedian on there?
Pete Dominic. He was on it for years, and now he's gone to a different channel. But that's some good stuff.
You like it, huh?
Unbiased. They give you the news. They give you.
It's unbiased. How do you deliver the news with complete objectivity?
They do it.
Oh, come on.
They really do.
Isn't that the lesson of Fox News, that no one is objective?
I mean,
I'm not saying there's a left-wing conspiracy or a right-wing conspiracy. I'm just saying human beings are flawed.
They are, but I think if you're...
Have you seen John Fugelsang's current show?
I haven't. I've heard him on POTUS, though, every once in a while.
Yeah. I saw him do a thing last night. It was pretty impressive.
I think you can, if you commit yourself to being unbiased... in the morning they have a news show. They bring on, call-in guests. They interview the guests. It's unbiased. It's just information gathering. They can do it.
I think you're wrong, but
Okay.
go on.
All right.
I think it's impossible to be completely objective. I think you aspire to be objective, but I think that's impossible.
Do you subscribe to SiriusXM?
I do not.
Okay.
I should get on that.
Well, if you do, give it a shot.
Well, I don't listen to the radio.
Okay.
I should. I don't listen.
You shouldn't do anything you don't want to do, Jim.
No, I want to be cool.
F that.
I want to be light.
I'm pretty sure I'm not cool for. I'm not cool. What am I trying to say? I don't think I'm cool for listening to SiriusXM.
Well, I think that's very cool. No, I'm sure you and the other person that listens to it are very cool.
I wanted to ask you how the your last special,
Yeah.
Mr. Universe.
Yes.
You did a little combination of the direct to fan model.
Yeah.
So I wanted to how did that go? Was it a success?
It was a pretty big success.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing to consider because obviously based versus the original model, which is selling it to a network, it was way more lucrative. But versus Louis making $1 million in
like 4 days or whatever it was, yeah.
It was not that.
Sure.
But there was also something of then I also then sold it to Netflix.
Right.
Which was very good for me.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's weird because I think that timing is so things are moving so fast. So the download, it's still on my website and but I don't know. I mean, I'm still interested to see what, if any, impact the book will have on my career. I mean, there is something about, I don't have an expectation that it will change my career, but there is, there are some people that will probably be introduced to Jim Gaffigan through the book, maybe.
Sure.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, depending on Sunday New York Times, that's for the book, correct?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
So I'm assuming you're going to be doing some more mainstream press, and I mean, it's so universal. I mean, not to call this a product or a brand, but
yeah.
I mean, parenting is is a huge business, and
I mean, believe me, I was very reluctant. I mean, to set it up, it's. When I started stand-up and I would see comedians talk about their wife and kids, I was, 26, and I would be like, please, I'm not interested. I can't get a date. Don't talk about your wife and kids.
Right.
So I always promised myself that I wouldn't let my act become me just talking about my kids. That and I always wanted my act to have a universal appeal, meaning everyone in the room could understand what I'm talking about. And so, I've always had in the past 3 specials, I've had maybe 4 or 5 minutes talking about my kids. But Twitter, as an instrument of creativity, kind of prompted me to just tweet comments about my kids where I felt like I didn't have to censor it. Whereas if people come to a stand-up show, I want them to be entertained versus on Twitter, it's free. Here's my cute observation about parenting.
Right.
But what I saw on Twitter is that people were definitely responding. Other parents were responding, or other people that babysit were responding on some of these observations about kids. And so that kind of prompted this idea of doing a book about parenting. And then I spent, a year or two because I didn't want to do a bad book. I naively, I thought, I want to do a book where I'm on the Daily Show talking about it. Right. So I had to get to the point where I'm like, look, you're not going to be on the Daily Show talking about a book. So grow up. But and then I was focused on, what type of parenting book could I do, and where it would be honest and funny.
Right.
Because I think some of the parenting books, I just, it's like people are just like, my life is so interesting. It's just all about me. So initially, when the book proposal had less autobiographical stuff in it, because I had read so many parenting books where I was like, look, I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm just going to talk about observations about these topics that have to do with parenting. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm doing. And the publisher was like, people want to hear about your experience. Yep. So then Jeannie and I wrote the book with Jeannie, and she turned a lot of my drips and drabs into, readable English. And so that's how it ended up to be the masterpiece. When do I get my Pulitzer?
I don't know. When do the Pulitzers?
I can get a Peabody for that, right?
I don't know.
Because Portlandia got a Peabody. You could get I think Louis got a Peabody.
He did.
You're a journalist. Why would a television show get a Peabody?
I don't know.
Okay.
I should know.
Yeah.
I really should. The reason I don't know is because I'm not getting a Peabody.
Well, one day you will.
Anytime soon.
One day you will.
Why no? This is my first question upon looking at this book. Yeah. So we're looking at the cover now. Dad is fat. Why no incredibly long subtitle like every other book?
Oh, that's so funny. There was a lot of interest in doing that from my publisher, and I was like, why do we need a subtitle? And they're like, well, to explain to people what it is. And I was like, well, people that are going to buy this are going to know my point of view and going to hopefully figure out that it's about parenting. Dad is fat.
Yeah, and they might also just do this little action.
It's interesting. They
flip. There
was a lot of interest in doing the long subtitle.
Of course.
Does Marin's new book, does it have a long subtitle about like how I started a podcast in my garage? And
I don't think so. I only have the galley. It's got a title. I don't think it's got a subtitle.
Maybe there's a trend moving away from that. Another thing that I thought was interesting, but it's not interesting for this podcast, is that when I was doing this...
Would you stop doubting yourself? You're going to convince everybody that they're wasting their time here.
Was that when I did the book, I was like, should I... Because I've, Michael Ian Black, people that have done books, sure. And people that have done books, they're like, hey, can I have a quote for my book? And I'm like, yeah, all right, fine. But they never asked me to do that. And I was like, why? And they're like, you don't need to do that.
I never understood that.
I never understood it. Like, well, I guess I'll read it.
Because they got
Tina Fey read it.
They got their... Yeah, and any rational person knows that those people didn't read the book.
Right.
Or they read like a chapter or 2 sentences. Like, I never understood why getting blurbing. Can I get a blurb?
A blurb.
So let's make up a subtitle. Dad is fat.
Initially I want the book title that I had in an earlier version of it was The Narcissist's Guide to Parenting Young Children, which is what I feel, because, I came from this standpoint of viewing parenting as this, and I talk about it, it's just like this voluntary enslavement. Why would someone do that? And what I think that book kind of talks about, obviously, you can see some of my selfishness and sarcasm, but the benefits of parenting are pretty profound. I mean, I think each of my kids has made me a better person. But, it's weird because there's also the parenting book. I don't want people to think that it's a sappy book, and I don't want people to think that it's a, I hate parenting kind of thing.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
You loved it.
I did. I really did. I think it's a positive book without being super schmaltzy or super corny.
Yeah.
And there's I underlined parts that I like that made me feel better about myself.
Yeah, I know I saw your Vine about that. Now, what do you mean? You're like, it's one of those things where you're like, well, at least I'm not as dark as Gaffigan is.
No. It's hey, this person is writing something that I can relate to. It's not just me. I shouldn't feel bad about feeling this certain way. Like this little thing. I'm reading from Jim's book. Everybody listening. When I didn't have kids, I didn't get it, and I shouldn't have. And this is the line I like. I had never fought in the Vietnam War and had dinner in Paris on the same day.
That's so true, isn't it?
And that's how I explain it to people that don't have kids. There's no middle ground. You either want to hug and kiss your kids, or you want to run out of the house screaming.
Right. Yeah, and it's an experience that you can't articulate because all the cliches have destroyed it. And that's the case of when people hold their own baby and they're like, it was like, well, this and that, and I teared and all that. I mean, I never cried holding one of my kids, but it's weird. And again, I think it goes back to we're animals.
Yeah.
And there's something primal and strange and something that we don't understand about it. And, there's something in our culture about, Khalil Gibran, said, they're on loan to us, and you get it as a parent. You're like, he nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh my gosh, this is something I can't mess up. And even if you try your best, because I do believe that really well-intended parents inadvertently mess up their kids.
Sure.
But if they hadn't tried, their kids might have been messed up anyway. So what I'm saying is don't try. Just give up.
I'm gonna tell my wife that you told me not to try. And I think we'll all be better people for it. Jim, I'm going to let you go, buddy.
Okay, thank you.
This has been enlightening.
This has been a Laughspin production.
This has been a Laughspin production.
Well, it's been fun.
Can you say you've been listening to the Laughspin podcast?
You've been listening to Laughspin's podcast. This is Jim Gaffigan, and you've been listening to the Laughspin podcast. Brought to you by Dylan Gadino.
Jim,
thank you.
Jim, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming in and making this easy for me.
This is great. Can I live here?
You can live here.
Cool. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
And there you have it. Thanks again to Jim Gaffigan for chatting with me. Go out and buy Jim's book. It's called Dad is Fat. It's in stores and online May 7th. Father's Day is around the corner. Go out and buy it for your father, or buy it for a guy who looks like your father, or buy it for a guy you really like who you wish was your father. Just go out and buy it. You will not be disappointed. If you haven't already subscribed to the Laughspin podcast, please do so. You can do it on SoundCloud, on iTunes, or on Stitcher. If you'd like to get in touch with me, feel free to do that. You can email me at dylan@laughspin.com, DYLAN@laughspin.com. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at laughspin.com and on Facebook and Tumblr. And you should also be checking out laughspin.com every day, many times a day, for a constant stream of comedy news, videos, interviews, both audio and written, and so much more. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time on the Laughspin Podcast. See ya.